This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Thousands gathered in Tehran to mourn top commander Soleimani as European powers call for restraint in U.S. Iran tensions. Arab and African nations contemplate impact of U.S. Iran tensions. And Turkey says it has begun deployment of troops to assist Libya's UN-backed government in Tripoli. You're watching Africa Live. A warm welcome from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour. In business, crude price tops $70 as U.S. Iran tensions escalate. And in sports, South Africa's Banyana players host AC Milan captain Valentina Gianchitti in Soweto. We begin the bulletin in Tehran, where thousands of people gathered to mourn the country's top military commander, Qasem Soleimani. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, led the prayer for Soleimani, who was killed Friday in a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad. Iran has threatened revenge while also abandoning parts of the 2015 nuclear agreement. As Iraq pushes for American troops to leave the country, President Donald Trump is threatening more sanctions on Iran and Iraq. Our correspondent Toby Muse explains.
Iranian state television announced on Sunday that the country was abandoning its commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal that saw Iran suspend its nuclear program in return for the easing of sanctions. In neighboring Iraq, the parliament has approved a resolution to expel U.S. forces as the consequences of last week's U.S. assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani unfold. The move comes as the U.S.-led coalition said it was pausing operations against ISIL in Iraq as it turns to protecting U.S. personnel following rocket attacks on the Green Zone in Baghdad and Iraqi bases on Saturday.
The government should end the presence of any foreign forces and prevent them from using the lands, water, and sky of Iraq.
The vote in the Iraqi parliament, mainly backed by Shia lawmakers, is to expel around 5,000 U.S. troops who are in the country to help fight ISIL in a mission that started 4 years ago.
The government should approach the United Nations and the Security Council to submit a complaint against the U.S. because of the violations against the sovereignty of Iraq.
Sunday's vote is non-binding and not final until Iraq's Prime Minister signs the bill. Additional legislation will be needed to make the order to expel the U.S. forces official. Already there are fears that this could open a space for a possible resurgence of ISIL, a group that has been battered but not eliminated. Let's remember, the unofficial coalition that worked together to take down ISIL was made up of Kurdish forces, Iraqi Shia militias, the Iraqi army, and U.S. troops. U.S. President Donald Trump's decisions have shattered that coalition. The Kurds feel betrayed after Trump removed U.S. troops from northern Syria last October. That cleared the way for Turkey to attack Kurdish forces. The U.S. continues to double down that going after Soleimani was the right decision to make.
The Iranians make the choice to respond. I hope that they don't. President Trump has made clear what we will do in response if they do, that our response will be decisive and vigorous, just as it has been so far.
President Trump has continued to make threats against Iran, including possibly attacking Iranian cultural sites, which could be considered a war crime. But right now, the assassination of the Iranian general has raised more questions than answers, and this is just the beginning. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
The UK, France and Germany have called on the relevant parties to exercise restraint and de-escalate tensions. Meanwhile, the German foreign minister says the Iranian announcement of rolling back commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal could be the first step to the end of this agreement. Meanwhile, China has criticized the United States for almost putting an end to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal by imposing ultimate pressure on Iran and ignoring international law and its international obligations. China has also urged all parties to exercise restraint to ensure peace and stability.
We believe that although Iran has been forced to reduce its liability to the nuclear deal due to external factors, it is still showing restraint and has clearly expressed its political will to comprehensively implement the deal. Iran is not violating its obligation to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The US has unilaterally withdrawn from the nuclear deal, defying international law and its international responsibilities. The US has also exerted ultimate pressure on Iran and tried to prevent other parties from meeting their obligations. This is the primary cause of the Iran nuclear tensions.
For more on this story, we're joined by Lucy Hoff in Brussels. Lucy, reports indicate NATO ambassadors are gathering in Brussels over the security situation in the Middle East. What more can you tell us?
Well, this is a meeting that's been called over the weekend, of course, an urgent response to the events unfolding in the Middle East. It's a meeting that's been called by the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg following a phone call between him and the US Defense Secretary over the weekend. We have already, of course, had the news that NATO is suspending its training activities in Iraq, reallocating resources to Iraqi bases, which is hosting coalition forces. So I think on the table will be a continued assessment of the situation unfolding in the Middle East, how best to de-escalate tensions there and prevent any major conflict, how to protect coalition forces on the ground working in the region, and of course how to reach out to Iraq and Iran to prevent further tensions escalating. But of course, the US seems to still be using inflammatory language, so I think the coalition will be working to present a coordinated response to this developing crisis.
Now, the recent NATO anniversary happened amid frictions between top powers. Are these likely to influence whatever statements come out about the current tensions between the US and Iran?
I think the activities of the US last week really shatter NATO's coalition at the moment, which was already on shaky ground when it celebrated its 70th anniversary last year. We, of course, saw during those celebrations tensions, particularly between the US President Donald Trump and his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron famously described NATO as brain dead. And I think we are really seeing how much of a weakened state NATO is in at the moment, of course, as it tries to bring itself together in Brussels today and present a coordinated front. But with this unilateral action from the US President Donald Trump, that really is on shaky ground. And the language that Donald Trump is using, particularly in recent days, is really at odds with the language being used by the leaders of France and the UK and Germany particularly. You mentioned earlier that statement issued by Macron and the German Chancellor Merkel and the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. They are calling for a de-escalation of tension in the Middle East, for reduction of tensions, for restraint on all sides. They're issuing particularly a message to Iran, criticism of escalating violence in the region, the presence of Iran-backed militia in the Middle East and the attacks on coalition bases in the region. But a message from them for restraint and for, of course, a de-escalation of those tensions. So really that language at odds with the language of the US President Donald Trump at the moment.
All right, Lucy, thank you for that update. Lucy Hoff live for us there in Brussels. Meanwhile, the tensions between the US and Iran has become a major source of concern to the international community. CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks at the impact an escalation in tensions could have on Arab countries and North Africa.
The killing of Iran's Qasem Soleimani could be a turning point in the Middle East. Iran has vowed to retaliate against the US, and this has led to major concerns in the region.
Iran uses its allies against the US or other enemies. These militias are more practical because Iran cannot attack the US directly, or the fight will be pushed inside Iran itself. It can use militias in different countries to target US interests or oil tankers and trade to put pressure on the US and its allies.
The US is sending thousands of extra troops to the region to bolster its security. Several Gulf countries which have US military bases, such as Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates and Qatar, have been on high alert in fear of attacks by Iranian forces or their allied militias. The impact of these developments could be far-reaching.
Definitely, there will be an economic impact, not just security. We have already seen the price of oil go up after the attack. This will affect oil inputs as well. We will see price increase of food and basic necessities as well as trade shrinking if the situation escalates.
The Middle East is already suffering from conflicts in Syria, Yemen and Libya. The U.S.-Iranian standoff could add fuel to these hot conflict areas.
There are international efforts to save face for Iran to avoid an uncalculated revenge, which could cost a lot for Iran. Iran has to be careful in its next step. It's undergoing an acute economic crisis, internal disturbances and demonstrations, and signs of divisions within different ethnicities and groups in the country. Any escalation could magnify the internal problems and cause chaos within.
For now, countries in the region are bracing for the worst to come. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The United Nations Security Council will meet behind closed doors Monday to discuss the situation in Libya. The talks will be the first chance to debate controversial security and maritime deals struck by Libya and Turkey in November, as well as Ankara's decision to send troops to Libya. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced the beginning of deployment on Sunday in support of the internationally recognized government of national accord. Just last week, the Turkish parliament approved a bill in favor of the one-year mandate. Libya's GNA government accepted the offer for military and logistical support from Turkey as it fights off an offensive by rival Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army to take over Tripoli. Let's get more from our correspondent, Mikhail Bardavid. She's live in Istanbul. Yasser Hakim live for us in Cairo. Mikhail, let's begin with you. Turkish troops, they're ready to deploy. Do we know the timelines and the troop numbers?
Those details we do not have, but Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has stated that they are gradually being deployed into Libya at this moment. He stated that their main task would be coordination, that they will be developing an operations center in Libya. He emphasized that the troops being sent to Libya are not combat forces. He stated that different teams will take coordination tasks and that senior Turkish military personnel will be coordinating the fighting force in Libya. So what we can understand here is that the people, the soldiers on the ground will belong to the government of national accord, which Turkey supports, but the Turkish military personnel that are going to be sent there will be trying to coordinate these different forces of the GNA inside Libya. They will also be providing training to these fighting forces of the GNA. However, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan did not say how many have already left or how many more will go or when they will be arriving either.
So, yes, sir, there is stiff opposition from the Khalifa Haftar side in Libya, but we also know that a section of the Arab League has been against this. What is the latest from the League?
Well, the Arab League has issued a statement condemning and criticizing the Turkish troops to Libya. But obviously, the Arab League is about 24 Arab countries, and there are a number of these countries that have been supporting, or at least have taken no stance against the Turkish move, such as Qatar and Tunisia. So there's not a unanimity. However, the vote or the final result was a condemnation of the Turkish involvement. And at the moment, the Arab League has also issued a statement calling for dialogue and to sit down and talk according to the UN peace initiative and also according to the Berlin Conference. And we expect also there will be a meeting of foreign ministers of Egypt, France, Italy, Cyprus and Greece on Wednesday here in Cairo. This might also be joined by the Arab League Secretary General to also discuss the latest developments in Libya. So there is still some ongoing contacts and talks. However, the condemnation or the criticism by the Arab League is something that will not take any further steps. Arab League is known to be a bit weak in taking action against any conflict and has not been proactive, but only known to only send condemnations and letters of criticism, that's all.
Okay, so Mikhail, we know the UN Security Council's meeting over the Turkey-Libya situation is today. Previous meetings haven't made much progress because of vetoes by powerful members. Do you see the Security Council meeting having an impact on Ankara's plans?
I honestly think it will really not deter Turkey that much. It seems that Turkey is not one, especially the ruling Justice and Development Party, known as AK Party, is not one to be really impacted by threats of sanctions or condemnation. They tend to stick to their course once they've made a decision, especially in the determination that we're seeing from the Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. We saw a similar situation during the operation that Turkey carried out in October into northern Syria against the YPG. So even then, despite threats of sanctions, Turkey continued its course. It was undeterred despite many international criticism. Well, what may be critical here is going to be Russia. Now, Moscow supports the opposing side in the Libyan conflict, the Libyan National Army. So they're going to be finding themselves on the opposite sides with Turkey, who backs the GNA. But Russian President Vladimir Putin is expected to arrive to Istanbul on Wednesday for the launch of the Turk Stream pipeline project, a massive cooperation project for Turkey and Russia. So even though they're on opposing sides, they're going to have to keep balance between the two countries' ties. And they have been on the opposite side in the Syrian conflict as well. Once again, they find themselves on the opposing side in Libya. So it's going to be really important for them to see how they can once again keep the balance for that at the same time.
Okay, so Yasser, an airstrike has killed over 30 military academy students in Tripoli. Any word on the security situation in Tripoli right now? And has any side claimed responsibility for that attack?
Now, the attack, the GNA, or the Government of National Accord, has blamed the LNA, or the Libyan National Army led by Khalifa Haftar, of being responsible for this attack on the military academy. Last night, the spokesman for the Libyan National Army in a press conference denied any involvement and has blamed the terrorist groups. He said terrorist groups were responsible for this and called for the UN to open an investigation and send an investigating team to Libya to determine who was behind this attack. So, so far, no one has claimed responsibility officially to this incident. Concerning the fighting, it's ongoing fighting so far between the LNA and GNA, the Libyan National Army, and the Government of National Accord forces, and it's around Tripoli. The Ma'atiqa airport has been closed down because of the security situation, while Misrata airport has been the alternative airport at the moment, where planes can use for now. And the roads leading to Tripoli from the south has been the host of a lot of fighting between both sides, as the Libyan National Army is trying to enter Tripoli through from the southern and southwestern part of the capital. But so far nothing new has happened. They are still fighting, but no one has gained much ground in the last few hours.
All right, Yasser Hakim in Cairo, Mikhail David live in Istanbul. Thank you both for joining us. Meanwhile, mourners gathered in the main square in the Libyan capital Tripoli for the funeral of 30 people killed during an attack on a military academy. At the time of the assault, cadets were gathered at a parade ground for training. The Tripoli-based government has blamed the hate on Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army, which has denied any involvement in that attack. CGTN's Noel Makugu brings us this report.
Blood and clots covered the parade ground where the recruits had been marching. Some people took to the streets to protest the attack while waiting to donate blood. The hit left at least 33 people seriously wounded, raising fears that the death toll could go up to 30.
These were new students on the training grounds marching after dinner. They were killed by an Emirati drone which struck them while they were training. 28 students were killed and the numbers are likely to increase because there were serious injuries. The total number of casualties was between 65 to 70 students.
Meanwhile, mourners gathered in the capital, Tripoli, to say their last goodbyes to the deceased.
Today we are attending the funeral of the heroes in Martyr Square. We are all from different Libyan cities. Indeed, to God we belong and to God we shall return. Today we are calling to severe relations with Egypt and the United Arab Emirates and to all who think they can tamper with the Libyan nation.
Tripoli is controlled by the internationally recognized government of National Accord. The capital has been facing an offensive from military commander Khalifa Haftar's Libya National Army that began in April last year. However, the LNA has denied taking part in the latest hit, described as an aerial bombing. In response, GNA allied forces have targeted LLA airbase in Al-Watia in an airstrike. The base is located about 159 kilometers southwest of Tripoli. An increase in airstrikes and shelling in and around the capital has caused the deaths of at least 11 civilians since December 2019, causing a subsequent shutdown of health facilities and schools. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Straight ahead. Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, reeling from massive floods that have killed at least 47 people. And Kenyans expressed their views after a court rules cohabiting partners do not have the same rights to property as married couples.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Let's head to Indonesia, where the capital is reeling from massive floods that have killed at least 47 people and forced hundreds of thousands from their homes. Authorities say more rain is expected. CGTN Silkina Awuwalia has more.
Jakarta experienced 1 month worth of rain in just one day, marking the new decade with one of the worst flooding since 2007. Data from the National Disaster Mitigation Agency shows at least 100,000 people are still displaced across Jakarta and West Java, seeking refuge in temporary shelters like this one. Many families are still unable to return to their homes because some areas are completely cut out of electricity. But rescue and relief efforts are quickly spreading from one district to the other. Most of the waters have receded from the city centers, but authorities are still working to clean up after the small neighborhoods and alleyways that are still submerged in water. President Joko Widodo has mentioned that the authorities must look after the well-being of those displaced, making sure that their safety remains a top priority. The Social Affairs Ministry is also working closely with the Health Ministry as well to make sure that the evacuees are fully taken care of. They aim to have all evacuees return to their homes by the end of next week, but it might be challenging because authorities are expecting more downpour in the coming days, saying that the rainy season will last all the way to March, which means that more flooding is possible up until then. Environmentalists are now urging the government to take this as a wake-up call and to start taking climate change seriously. Aside from that, this flooding highlighted Indonesia's massive infrastructure problems. As a developing city, Jakarta has a lot of construction going on, but they're not accompanied by proper water management measures, a problem that the government needs to tackle before the worst occurs. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
A Kenyan court has dealt a blow to cohabiting partners by ruling that they do not have the same rights to property acquired during the union as married couples do. Wilkista Nyabwa sampled the views of Kenyans on this topic.
Some couples formalize their unions in white weddings. Others favor traditional weddings, while others still simply move in together and consider themselves married. They call these unions come-we-stay marriages, and until recently they were generally accepted among the Kenyan public, but a court ruling threw a spanner in the works. The Court of Appeal ruled that the benefits granted to a lawful marriage are not available to cohabiting couples who are deemed never to have been married at all. A cohabiting partner, therefore, has no right to claim any property that the couple may have acquired jointly should they separate, a ruling that has left many Kenyan couples floundering.
So we hit the streets of Nairobi to find out just what Kenyans think about the concept of cohabitation and whether, given recent developments, they think it is important to formalize such unions.
Some feel that couples are justified in taking their time to formalize their unions.
Formalizing it should be given a time period. Maybe after you guys have spent time for like a year or 2 years or so.
While others feel that it is important to have legal unions where the benefits trickle down to the children.
I stood my ground and insisted that we have a wedding before moving in together. It's important because if something happens to the man and the wife is left with the children and you weren't married, you won't be recognized by the church and the government. It's as if you were just a friend who came to stay.
Lawyers argue that the law is contradictory as Kenyan laws also recognizes marriage unions by couples who have lived together as man and wife for at least 6 months.
The government is interested in preserving families being the basis of the society as a whole. Why would these people who can be presumed by the law not get the same benefits that married couples, married under the other regimes of law, get?
From the different opinions, it is clear that marriage means different things to different people, and questions abound as to whether the law should change to meet their needs. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
Coming up in business news. Crude price tops $70 as U.S. Iran tensions escalate. And South Africa's power utility Eskom extends power rationing.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Oil prices continued to rise as tensions escalate between the United States and Iran. Futures for Brent crude gained 2.4% to reach $70.24 per barrel. This is the first time prices have hit that amount in more than 6 months. U.S. oil futures advanced 2.1% to reach $64.36 per barrel. Oil prices rose more than 3% on Friday after Qasem Soleimani, who was a top Iranian commander, was killed in a U.S. strike ordered by President Donald Trump. The killing risks further escalating tensions in the Middle East, home to major oil-producing countries and key energy supply routes. In the latest developments, Trump threatened major retaliation if Iran responds to the killing and vowed to slap sanctions on Iraq if U.S. troops were expelled from the country. South Africa's struggling state power firm Eskom says it will extend electricity cuts until 5 a.m. local time on Monday. This after a conveyor belt failed at its Medupi coal-fired power station. The cash-strapped utility said on Sunday that the conveyor belt had been repaired, but that plant breakdowns were still constraining the power system in the country. Eskom has been battling to keep the lights on despite low electricity demand over the Christmas and New Year public holidays. It last implemented power cuts in mid-December. The firm's executives have blamed the repeated problems at coal-fired power plants on a lack of critical midlife maintenance at older stations. Public transport in France has now been on strike for a month as the country's unions protest against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to reform the pension system. The French Prime Minister will hold fresh talks with unions from Tuesday, but with neither side willing to back down, there seems to be no end in sight. CGTN's Peninah Karibe reports from Paris.
It's now the longest strike in France for more than half a century. Railway unions walked out on December the 5th, and they say they're not going back to work unless President Macron abandons his pension reform plans completely. Only about 35,000 people actually are on strike, 7% of railway staff, but that's been enough to grind the railway network and the Paris metro to a near total halt. The unions refused government demands for a Christmas truce. Now they say they're starting the new year with fresh determination.
We're not striking for fun. Most of our members support us going even further from Monday because the president has angered everyone. He won't listen to anything, so our call is getting louder and louder across the whole union movement.
The government is hoping it can drive a wedge between those unions who are opposed to all pension reform and those who accept the idea in principle but not the policy detail. It's already offered a concession, pushing back the planned start date of the new system, but the unions haven't budged. This is about much more than pensions now. For the unions, backing down would signal the beginning of the end of their political influence. For President Macron, it's a question of credibility. He wants to show he can succeed where the last 3 presidents failed in their attempts to reform the system. Polls show 2/3 of French voters do accept some reform to the system, which currently has 42 different sets of rules for different professions, is necessary. But a similar proportion don't trust President Macron to carry it out fairly.
People feel that behind this reform there's a plan to defraud the French, as some analysts put it. A plan to reduce people's pension entitlements in general, rather than a balanced reform of the system.
Refinery workers plan to join the strike next week, aiming to blockade refineries across the country and cause a petrol shortage. But even if France starts to run out of fuel, both the unions and the president have too much at stake now to back down. Peninah Karibe, CGTN, Paris.
Canadian mining firm First Quantum Minerals Limited is considering a $1 billion investment in its Kansashi copper mine in Zambia. The move will bolster output at the mine and prevent production declines. The firm hopes to increase annual production to 300,000 tons over time from the 235,000 tons produced in 2019. However, the dispute between miners and the government over taxes and assets is likely to complicate approval from the board. Analysts argue the project will win approval if there are significant changes to Zambia's tax regime. Ethiopia has launched an electronic tax collection platform to enhance efficiency in the country's trade and logistics sector. The electronic single window service has been designed to speed up the customs process for importers and exporters. It will reduce the paperwork process to 15 days from the current 44 days. The platform is expected to gradually cut the 15 days process to 3 working days. The government has also opened up logistics-related businesses to foreign companies and investors. The move is aimed at improving the ease of doing business ranking. Ethiopia is currently ranked at 159 out of 190 countries on the World Bank Index. In China, a reserve ratio requirement cut announced at the start of the year by the People's Bank of China has taken effect today. The cut marks the 8th move by the central bank since early 2018. Jiang Junfeng takes a closer look at this latest round of policy support for China's economy.
An unexpected snow in Beijing and a much anticipated monetary easing from Chinese policymakers. China's central bank has decided that effective today, January the 6th, all Chinese commercial banks' reserve requirement ratio will be cut by half a percentage point to release to the market $115 billion so that companies, especially small companies, can get more loans and a slowing economy can be supported. China's growth rate has cooled from 6.8% in 2017 to 6% in the third quarter of 2019. Now the funding ratio that banks must hold in reserve has been lowered to 12.5% after 8 cuts since early 2018. The central bank also expects that more liquidity in the banking system could help ease a possible credit crunch around the time of the Spring Festival when demand for cash usually surges. The central bank confirmed its priority for 2020 during a weekend tone-setting meeting. That's to stick to prudent monetary policy, but also exercise flexibility. The PBOC also said it will improve the incentive measures for banks to lend more to small and micro businesses. Chinese policymakers have repeatedly pledged there will be no flood-like stimulus because global experience tells us that too much stimulus would mean more debt and asset bubbles. Zheng Junfeng, CGTN, Beijing.
In other developments, let's take a look at what more we can expect from the tech world in 2020.
You know, every now and again in the world of tech, there is a game changer that comes along.
iPhone.
Tesla.
The Sony Walkman.
Introducing Game Boy.
You get the drift, right? And now 2020 is here. The question turns to, what's next? 2 experts here to give their predictions. Mike Butcher, editor-in-large of TechCrunch, and Tom Honeyhands, or The Tech Chap. He's the guy behind one of the UK's top tech YouTube channels, both giving us their thoughts on what's in store for the year ahead.
Last year we saw Samsung release the big wide foldable phone, but there were all sorts of problems with it. Mobile phone manufacturers will start to perfect that, but the issue it will remain the delicacy of the phone.
Huawei is really interesting because their Mate 30 Pro phone was one of the most anticipated but also most disappointing phones because there were no Google Play services in the West, in Europe and America. It's such a shame because they have such innovative products, great cameras, fantastic batteries. The phones are incredible.
As 5G networks roll out and the debate about Huawei continues, the issue is not necessarily who controls the whole thing, but who's the brains of the network. And that's the big debate, is Huawei getting into the sort of real heart of the 5G network, the intelligent part, or is it just bells and whistles and the networks?
People have been saying this is the year for years. I think 2019 it was turned on. I think 2020 is the time we're going to get it in the iPhone, we're going to get it in more mainstream phones. So it's going to be for everyone 2020, so not just super high-end. There's just a handful of handsets right now.
The biggest impact of 5G will be in industry and in business, where things like the Internet of Things will start to take off. This year I think you'll see driverless cars or driverless technology coming to much more mainstream manufacturers like the big German automakers, of course. They'll be semi-driverless. certainly a lot of more autonomy in your average electric car as well.
I mean, it's obviously really, really exciting. We're going to get the Tesla Model Y in 2020, that new Cybertruck that we've all seen, that's probably 21, but we're going to see a lot more electric cars and also a little bit more autonomous driving. Oh, this is exciting because obviously we've got the PlayStation 5 and the just announced Xbox Series X, so they'll be fighting each other for your home television media spot in November, December this year. So that's going to be a big upgrade in terms of graphics and also streaming.
The console wars are definitely back with a vengeance. But coming from left field, you'll see Google's Stadia streaming service take off.
The biggest improvement, which is a little techie, but it's going to be SSDs or solid state storage, much faster than hard drives. And what that means is loading times will be gone or much, much faster.
And so another 12 months is upon us. A year of innovation, a year of surprises. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. And that is part of the fun. Phil Lavelle, CGTN in London.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up after the break. A child prodigy taking Nigeria by storm with her exceptional skills in playing the saxophone.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Landmines are indiscriminate weapons. They can remain dangerous many years after a conflict has ended. Every year, thousands of civilians are killed by the explosions, and children are the most affected. In Tanzania, however, a non-governmental organization is training giant rats to detect and clear landmines, saving communities living close to those areas. The rats have gained popularity and are being referred to as hero rats.
My name is Pendo Isaac Msegu. I'm working with Apopo. I always love animals. My routine is early in the morning. Every day I have to train the rats, doing the daily health check. They have very strong capacity of smelling. It's easy to handle them. 9 months, they will be in advanced level, be ready to be deployed. We have work at Angola, Mozambique, and now Cambodia. By training this animal and sending outside the country for deploying them, I believe that I saved a lot of people.
A child prodigy in Nigeria is taking the country by storm with her exceptional skills in playing the saxophone. CGTN's Deji Badmas visited her home in Lagos in Nigeria and brings us the story.
At just 10, Temilayo Abodunri is making headlines in Nigeria, not because of her academic awards, of course she has a number of that, but because of her talent in playing the saxophone. She's arguably the youngest saxophonist in Nigeria who makes money playing the music instrument. Her parents discovered early enough that she has an ear for music, and they began to nurture her talent.
I started playing instruments generally at age 4. So when I was 6, I performed at the place, well, I started the keyboard actually, because anytime I play a sound, I'm able to repeat the same sound. So my parents saw that I liked the keyboard a lot. So when they got it for me, a mini keyboard, they now got me a teacher, and they saw that I was catching up with it. So I started learning the keyboard before I moved to the saxophone.
The child prodigy has been called the Candidolfo of Nigeria after the famous Dutch saxophonist. She skillfully plays the alto saxophone and several other instruments, including the keyboard, recorder, flute, guitar and drums. And at just 10, she's been invited to several shows around Nigeria, playing alongside top-rated artists in the country.
Seeing her perform on the same stage with other big artists that even myself look up to them, you know, like, I don't think I'll meet them one-on-one, you know, but eventually because of her, we get to talk, we relate, they appreciate her, you know, support what she does, and you know, encourage her. You know, that is one of the most vital part of the music thing that I've really learned.
On managing her musical career in school, Timmy says her parents help plan her day to ensure a balance between both worlds.
Mostly on weekend, Mondays to Fridays and Mondays to Wednesdays, I focus more on my school, but like maybe in the evening, I practice then before I go to bed, yeah. And if I'm mostly from like Thursdays to Sundays, I do more of my saxophone, but I still read most times.
It's easy to predict a career path for Timmy as being a full-time saxophonist, but she's open-minded about her future.
Yes, I like to take it as a career and something I'll continue doing. But who knows whether I want to continue doing other things, because I also like drawing. Well, I've not really had time to focus on drawing or how to learn how to draw. And if I'm a saxophonist, I'm also an artist. And if I'm a drawer, I also draw. I'm also an artist. So who knows, in the future I can be any of them, as long as I'm an artist.
The sound of Timmy's saxophone drops jaws everywhere she plays, and show organizers cannot but appreciate her with cash gifts. The money she gets from her shows go into a trust for her education to secure her future as an educated and multi-talented artist. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And coming up in sports, South Africa's Banyana Banyana players host AC Milan captain Valentina Gianchetti in Soweto.